how about this? ACAB. All cops are Babylonians.
Personally, when I look at things like all cops are bad, I think that's not a good phrase because it's the kind of thing that is used in a propagandistic way to encourage mistrust between us and heighten conflict between us and cops.
Are all cops Babylonians? Yes, but we're all citizens of Babylon as well.
How are you any different than Simon the Zealot now?
Here's how I'm different.
Better looking.
Okay.
Here, we're just diving in right now. This is a hard start.
It doesn't apply at all.
No, this does apply at all. No, this applies a lot to the church. Okay? There's only one thing that is good that came out of COVID, I believe. And this is where the old school libertarian that was probably sitting right next to Richard, the California libertarian chief of Humboldt County or wherever you are. All right. The one good thing that came out of COVID for conservatives was they finally realized, just like Michael Malice has said, that the cops are the bad guys. Okay. That we forget in our fervor as members of the church to respect law and order and to respect the sacrifice of these men who oftentimes have very noble goals of going out and defending the inspired Constitution and so on and so forth. When the things go bad, who is the right arm, not of God, but of the state? The police are. And who were the ones arresting pastors for singing songs 6 feet apart from each other in their congregations' parking lots, successfully socially distanced across from a Walmart where the secular people could go worship the corporations and go buy all of their stuff? Who was the ones arresting these pastors?
I'll answer your question.
It was cops.
It was bad cops. It was bad cops because at the same time that you had that happening, what about the sheriffs who chose not to enforce unconstitutional laws?
There was a shockingly small minority. Now,
you
don't forget,
just didn't hear about it.
I've been to the Supreme Court because of corrupt cops. I've been on the receiving end.
And there are bad cops out there. I'm not saying there aren't, but there are also good ones. There are good sheriffs in small towns who actually, like you were mentioning one before, who won't enforce the unconstitutional laws that are there. So rather than say, hey, you know what? All police, they're out.
Well,
recognize good ones and point out bad ones.
I'm not saying all police are out, but this whole thing got started, and we started with this hard intro because you had suggested, Richard, as a conversation topic. What was the conversation topic again? Private security versus police forces?
Yeah, Brad and I had been talking about, what a libertarian perspective on law enforcement, how it looks. Do we get a bunch of private corpo security guards running around, or do we support law enforcement? I feel like it's somewhere more towards the middle of we need to restore law enforcement to their original purpose and function, not catching runaway slaves, right? Not slave patrols, but actually returning to a protect and serve, community policing of actually being in the communities, doing the work of knowing who's in their neighborhood.
Because Elon Musk...
That's actually a Malcolm X thing.
Yep.
Really?
It is.
He wanted that.
Yep.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Well, and it's true because what people forget is that just like Elon Musk said, a government is simply, the U.S. government is simply a corporation who has found a monopoly on violence.
Yes, they have a monopoly on force, 100%.
They have a monopoly on force, and we can't be saying that, you got to break up Twitter, and you got to break up Exxon, and you got to break up all of the robber barons in the 1800s due to all of these, anti-capitalist and whatever I can't remember the name of the rules are. But
I'd say this. You don't have freedom if your freedom comes down to hoping that your authority is not a bad person. Because now it's like, I hope I have a good cop. How about this? ACAB. All cops are Babylonians. And they're Babylonians because they acquiesced to a corrupt system and enforce whatever laws are given to them. Majority of them do. And every single time in history, we've heard, I was just following the orders. Bad things have happened.
Especially when spoken with a German accent.
Yes. Now, who were the cops in the New Testament? Who were they?
The centurions.
And what did they do?
They crucified Christ.
They killed the Lord our God because they were following orders. Now, if Jesus was alive today, who would have arrested him and taken him to the state prison for execution? The cops.
And do you know what he would have said, just like he said when he was on the cross? Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do.
I would have been more like Peter. Time to start busting cat. You know what I'm saying?
Aim for some ears. Yeah.
So we know exactly who Andrew the Zealot in the modern 12 apostles would be, right? You know what I'm saying?
Just saying, like, I think, okay, so one, when Christians decided to get super buddy-buddy with the right wing, that was during, thank you evangelicals, okay? They gave us that, so now we're stuck with the right wing. We decided to adopt the cuckery of state worship. And now,
right.
you know, I'm sorry, like, people criticize President Nelson for saying, yeah, we're getting rid of all the patriotic hymns out of the hymn book. And they're like, how dare you? My cousin served the country and he fought. Okay, we all have a cousin that served the country, okay? Right. Everyone has a military family. Have you seen what we've done to the world? They need a lot of soldiers. We're all connected to them. But you know what? We don't need songs about bombs bursting in air and going, wow, look at all those dead, bloody bodies on the field. At least the flag is waving. Like, what? No. Okay. That's not what we need. There is a talk by Spencer W. Kimball called The False Gods We Worship. And it is the most... This talk would piss everybody off today because he literally calls the military Satan's counterfeit. And he says, like, in Satan's counterfeit, we train a man in the art of war. And we rely on fortifications of stone, steel, and missiles to protect us. When the Lord said, all we have to do is follow him and he will protect us.
I think that's fair. And so I'm kind of in between.
Also Benson kind of got us more right wing.
Just a little bit, you know. Although he is the one that did say no to the missile bases in the Rocky Mountains.
He was a prophet. Benson was a great guy. I love Benson, but I'm just saying.
So I'm not quite a cab Kwaku. You know what I'm saying?
Not all cops are bastards because they have mothers who've raised them. All cops are Babylonians.
Babylonians. And I think it's fair to say all cops are Babylonians as a reminder that cops are the extension of the enforcement of the law that the secular state has chosen.
And every single time you fall in to the manipulation and the lie, the blue lives matters, I back the blue. You are just buying into, I support what the government is doing. That's why I got in trouble when I was in school because I said, I don't like the term support the troops because the troops are not an entity to be supported. They just do what the government and military says. So by extension of saying I support the troops, what you're really saying is I support what the government's doing. And if you don't think we should be invading Iraq to find non-existent WMDs and killing 1.7 million Iraqis, then maybe you don't support the troops.
Now, hold on a second. I push back on that, though, just saying that I believe that the definition, and this is what I learned at the Saints in War Project at BYU, and I love this phrase, that somebody asked, why do we say that all men that serve in the military are heroes, even if maybe some of them didn't see battle or whatever? I don't remember what the exact question was. But the guy responded back and he said, well, that's because even the lowest among them went and served so that you didn't have to.
Okay.
Which I feel is a heroic act and a Christ-like act.
And I would even say, Kwaku, that...
So you can support the individual...
Yes.
While simultaneously believing all cops are Babylonians as a reminder.
So do you think it's fair to call the German soldiers in the 40s heroes?
If they were unaware. Okay, and I've actually extensively researched this, and what's interesting is the Nazi argument is what birthed the modern inquiry into psychology. Psychology was called behavioralism in the 40s because they didn't really know what to call it.
Believe me, I know, Carter.
Yeah, exactly. and the whole theory of studying our psychology as a thing that is a precursor to our emotions and our actions is a whole scientific field that wasn't really birthed until the 60s due to us trying to figure out how could those people that showed up in the Nuremberg trials have ended up doing the things we figured out they did by the end of the 50s. Like, how is that fathomable? We need to study this. Okay, so I think that is a good question. I'm not specifically ready to throw people under the bus in the 30s because we didn't
I would
understand.
never throw people under the bus the way they threw the Arabs under the tanks. Brad, I know you had something to say.
I wanted to point out before passing it off to Richard because I know he's been.
By the way,
to get in a word.
that was not at all defense of anybody in the Nuremberg trials, okay? I'm talking about the common man who had been convinced, because like when you look at the propaganda pamphlets, because I've studied 1930s and 40s propaganda quite heavily, okay?
And people really need to look into it more and understand how that propaganda
Do you
was
know
used.
how the bad guy with the ugly mustache got power? It was actually through medical legislation. That's why I talk about medical tyranny so much. He actually made an effective claim that due to all of the horrible mandates that came down after World War I in the Treaty of Versailles, I think it was called, that the average German citizen, his claim was that the average German citizen was not getting the 2,000 calories necessary to be an effective and healthy human being. And he showed the malnutrition in some of the urban areas of Germany was causing this weakness, and we need to bring back the great reiteration. We need to make Germany great again, i.e. have a third iteration of the kingdom, German word for kingdom being Reich, you know what I'm saying? In order to literally reestablish the health of the nation.
Now,
and if you're semi-starving and you're living in Berlin and you had a decent middle-class house and could provide for your family,
I completely get
you
it.
could get duped.
And part of what we're talking about here that I think is worth deeper study by people is actually looking up Edward Bernays. He's the father of modern propaganda. This was the nephew of Sigmund Freud. And he birthed freaking propaganda.
Yeah.
And he's actually very heavily quoted by Goebbels. So it literally, Goebbels got his book and was like, this is key to helping us get our goals. So look into it.
Why do
to
all
understand.
these bad ideas come out of Germany? You know what I'm saying? Wasn't Calvin the guy burning people out of Germany?
Yeah,
Martin Luther.
He was Swiss.
Martin Luther was German.
Okay, yeah. Martin Luther was German. He's like literally writing books like against the Jays and their lies. You know, it's just like,
But here's the thing that I want to say with this. I think that there's, personally, when I look at things like all cops are bad, I think that's not a good phrase because it's the kind of thing that is used in a propagandistic way to encourage mistrust between us and heighten conflict between us and cops, which isn't good.
In a cultural way.
Because if we know the cops around us, we will be able to help create more of those good cops. There's a lot of things that need to be fixed, like the way that they shuffle bad cops around from one place to another because
let me
of
answer your
unions
question.
being horrible.
And then after,
and then on the support the troops, I think that's actually a net good thing because it is more about the individuals. I do think there's potential for it to be used the way you're talking about, Kwaku, where people are using it to say, I just support the government. I think that's what the government wants it to mean, but we can use it in a different way.
And let me answer your question, Kwaku, because I think
I have things saved to both of those.
Okay. I think you'll totally understand. This is the reason why when you say like, why is that bad? Well, because when you engage in waving the Blue Lives Matter flag, like you say, okay, and you have people push back on you for saying, oh, ACAB, you know what I'm saying? You're creating a cultural tribalistic argument.
Yeah.
Whereas I feel much more comfortable, and I will now personally adopt your phrase that all cops are Babylonians, because it's a humorous, philosophical point you're making, not a cultural point you're making. Okay. So you're taking it out of the tribalistic realm and you're putting it into the, hey, you got to remember this. All cops, even though it's Brother Allred and you like him, at the end of the day, whose law is he enforcing? He's enforcing Baal's law. He's enforcing Babylon's rule. You know what I'm saying? And so I think it's good to say all cops are Babylonians, because then it also reinforces the idea that, hey, you have to remember that even though you might know this guy from your soccer team, like at the end of the day, he's wearing a camera that people from the state will determine where you go, not just him and you like him because he was on your soccer team or he happens to believe Jesus is his savior just like you do. Like all cops are Babylonians, not as bad people, definition of Babylonian, but arms of the Babylonian state in their function.
Here's what I think.
Okay.
One, I think, yes, it creates an us versus them mentality. That's the mentality they already have. And I'm sorry, like you can only watch 100 videos a day of cops abusing people in horrific ways, including children, until you say, you know what? Sorry, there's no more summer you were good. They collectively, we are not in the 50s. They have social media. They have union. If they really wanted to actually make a formidable change, they would. But they operate on blackmail against each other the same way these freaking weirdos in Hollywood do and these politicians do. Police blackmail is a big, big thing. And you want to know how many police in these precincts have shiz on each other. And it's, yeah, I did that, but I know you did this. And the minute you denounce me to these BLM leftists, that video is going out. They do that to each other, by the way, all the time. So the whole police network is operating on a platform of complete sin. So that's why I say they're Babylonians, because the Babylonians are really big on, that whole blackmail thing. And
I think that's a little bit too cynical.
I promise it's not.
I think
not.
there's.
I swear it's not.
Look.
So I gotta keep going. Okay,
LAPD.
Yeah, he's got to address the propaganda argument.
Okay.
The second is on propaganda. I know people say when they say support the troops, I think they've already bought into the manipulation. They may mean no, I support my brother, but extend it. I support my brother in what he's doing. And what is he doing? He's doing what the government has told him to do. And I remember, I am from Texas. I have a lot of people in the military in my family. We've argued about this. I was one of those freaking wow, thank you for how have you guys gone and really just looked at the photos from Iran and Iraq?
Dude, I was taken from my family by the U.S. government for 6 months and had to live in foster care because my parents were arrested for a crime they were found factually innocent of. And it took years, like literally 14 years of legislation against the county of Los Angeles. You know what I'm saying? It's nuts. Like literally the Ninth Circuit Court said the Humphreys family are living a nightmare created by the state of California, which is the 5th largest government in the freaking world. Okay. So like, trust me, I am here with you. The only thing I'm saying that's different is I got a question for you. Before you go on to your second point, I want to finish addressing the first point. How is what you just said saying we have to address them this way because they already address us this way? How is that any different? And I don't know the right answer to this, okay? But I am challenging what you said to see what you have to say. How is what you said any different than what Andrew the Zealot said to Jesus Christ in defense of a physical revolution against the Romans instead of a spiritual one? Sorry, Simon the Zealot. You're right. I apologize. Yeah. How are you any different than Simon the Zealot now?
Here's how I'm different.
Better looking.
Probably
for
not.
Starters.
Probably
and
not.
Secondly,
okay, what?
I need to correct this thing. What makes it different is they were actively engaged in what they knew their cause was as a spiritual front, because the Lord they knew the Lord was going to be crucified. That was not something they could stop. That was God's will. It needed to happen for the salvation of man to ever be in effect. Okay. We are not under that same apostolic New Testament mandate. We are under the mandate to prepare the world for the second coming of Jesus Christ, which the government is actively trying to prevent, which the government is doing everything they can to usher in the second coming of the Antichrist. So going along with their narrative and saying, well, we have to respect and love these centurions because this time they'll be good. This time they'll be the good ones. But they just shot a 12-year-old in the park for playing with a toy. Okay, that one was bad. But they just raped my wife. Okay, that one was bad. But they just arrested a mom in Idaho at a park during COVID. That one's bad. How many damn bad ones? We got a lot of them. But the good ones, we swear, are worth supporting the bad ones.
To be fair, most of the bad ones are only kept in there because of how screwed up our police unions are.
And they won't fix it. But they won't fix it.
But we could.
Which is, well, this is why I want to loop in the libertarian.
Yeah. I want to hear
I want to loop in the libertarian here. Because I agree with Kwaku.
Well, I didn't get to finish the troop thing, though. This is why I like this. Okay,
finish
you guys
the
talk
troop
for a while. This is what I'm saying, though. I don't think you can say I support the troops without doing this and putting on goggles. Because the minute you put yourself in the position of the Iranian or the Iraqi, and you realize, yeah, my door just got kicked down and I just saw my parents murdered because of your troops. Those Our troops are their terrorists. And so how can I, as someone who believes that we're all children of God and that there is zero patriotic exemption, by the way, to the commandments, there's not one. Thou shalt not murder is clear. How am I supposed to say, no, actually, this system is good and I'm proud of the red, white, and blue? No, we have been responsible for and complicit in genocide. And, I mean, only got to take a look at our freaking for-profit prisons right now to go, yeah, no, we still rely on slave labor. Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't know why Christians have decided that having a critical eye to the Babylon of our own country is somehow a cardinal sin, but it like we do live in Babylon, and I'm sorry, our president is Nimrod, and the police are centurions.
No, Nimrod was very articulate, right? You know what I'm saying? I don't think our president is Nimrod. I think it's like Nimrod's grandpa.
He's a Nimrod.
Yeah, he's like, you know. There it is. So okay, so Kwaku, I hear what you're saying big time. I don't think necessarily by saying I support our troops, you're supporting what the worst amongst them have done. I think the general colloquial understanding of support our troops is a respectful nod to those that have paid the ultimate sacrifice for the good aspects of our country. I don't think anybody says I support our troops out of any kind of vague.
But Carden,
no, I get that it can be misused and can be abused by people.
That's not what I was going to say. I was going to say this, though. This is where we have to get into the nitty-gritty of it. Because for the good aspects of our country, that freaking war that was around when we were all, I guess, like, we were very little.
Yeah,
I was a
kids.
baby.
Yeah.
That war was not a war to protect us. They lied.
I
that
totally
was a
understand
fake everything to get us into a genocidal war.
Look, I'm not here to defend. You're talking about the war in Iraq, so let's just speak frankly.
But the soldiers in there were not defending the good parts of our country. They were doing the boots job.
I think it's hold on. I
think you need to put
hold on. First off, we're veering out of this because we're not going to relitigate the war in Iraq. I will say this: I think plenty of people viewed the initial entrance into the war as defending freedoms. And I think it's easy in hindsight after 10 years of forensic digging, figuring out that, they lied about WMD, they lied about this, they lied about that. I think now there's a general good understanding that was not a just war, as the Pope used to call it. So when those people were saying, I support our troops in 2002, they weren't supporting what they knew. That's a presentist argument, okay? So let me just veer out of that because I just want to say this. I agree with you, Kwaku, that all cops are Babylonians, and we have to understand that there are bad actors that can weaponize the desire that we have to support the sacrifice of the individuals who are doing good in order to further bad, okay? And the number one bulwark against that, I think, is actually lessening the size of our government's ability to exercise violence or influence on others and against ourselves, which is what the topic of this podcast originally was: private security versus military. Yeah. So I'm curious to see from the libertarian brother how guys like Kwaku would be assuaged, who have very good arguments. I don't agree with every single one of them, but he has good arguments and good points he's making out. How do you think you and your buddies over there who lose all your elections, you know what I'm saying, would help bail us out of this situation?
we at least lose on moral ground because we vote according to principle, not to party, right? But let's from your perspective, right? People saying we support the troops is a blanket ultra-nationalist statement that says we approve of and sign off on everything that they have done in every country since the initiation of war powers with the United States.
Accidentally, right? Yes.
Accidentally, yes. They unknowingly, unwittingly support it. We run into this all the time with people talking to us about the Libertarian Party and do we support the troops? What do we think? We are an anti-war party. Mm-hmm. We're opposed to the war. As a representative for the Libertarian Party Veterans Caucus, where we're trying to lead libertarians to veteran issues and lead veterans to libertarian solutions to their problems, right? We support the troops in that we don't want there to be any more PTSD. We don't want there to be 22 suicides a day. How we do that is stop nation building where we ought not be.
So
the first
you're
place.
really a Tulsi Gabbard fan? No, I'm just kidding.
So I'm a fan of the National Guard. I did 6 years active duty, and then I transitioned to the National Guard because I feel like national defense is a proper role for government, right? And that falls into constitutional government, that it be defensive. You made a comment about 9/11 and our response to it, the war on terror, a war on an idea that it was misbegotten, and looking at it in hindsight that people were lied to, manipulated, right? I agree. I agree that we had a critical moment in the history of our nation to when we received that attack to humble ourselves in that moment and ask ourselves, but why would they attack us? What are they attacking? They're attacking our financial institutions. They're attacking the proliferation of and all the things that they don't want in their countries. That is what they see as harming their people. And also all of the interference that the U.S. government has taken part in for decades. And this is their response to it. Instead of reflecting and going, no, we shouldn't go and be the demons that they say we are.
There are phrases, and I only bring this up to augment what you're saying, because if I were a diplomat with Brad, because he's the most diplomatic amongst us, I would want to bring to the attention of all of our U.S. leaders the fact that these slogans coming out of the Middle East are interesting. If you look at Arabic propaganda, one of the number one slogans that the people are holding up in these protests, is we want modernization without westernization.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And I think that's very important to understand if you're going to truly try and approach governance in a Christ-like way.
Correct.
Okay, keep going.
Right. And so back to your other point as well about law enforcement. My role in the military is security forces. I've done training with multiple law enforcement organizations, with law enforcement academies, with the California Highway Patrol, right? I have done training with them, and I've seen the very things that you're talking about, not as far as the corruption goes, but as far as the us versus them mentality and the approach. That's part of their building in camaraderie and trying to build in integrity, right? Not personal character integrity, but structural organizational integrity, right? Keeping things cohesive, looking out for each other. It is a fraternity. It is a brotherhood, right? And to help sort of break down those barriers means we have to do the difficult thing, is have the conversation, meet the people that we know in the ward that are in law enforcement, and erode their preconceived notions, or perhaps our own preconceived notions about what they might be doing in their roles. Are all cops Babylonians? Yes, but we're all citizens of Babylon as well, right? And we bear, as we talked about previously with agency, personal responsibility in being involved and making those personal connections so that we can return or have a restoration to what it should be in law enforcement, which is community policing and actually being a benefit to the community as opposed to enforcing unconstitutional law.
Actually serving and protecting the community that you're part of.
That it's not just a slogan on the side of the patrol car, but it's actually something that's written on their hearts.
Yeah.
Like in the old days when if a bunch of guys came in and stole from the community bank, the community would form a posse and they go chase them down and execute them.
But the original question was private security versus an expansion of police.
I'm telling you, the day we got rid of posses, I literally think was one of the most epic declines of rule of law in our country.
Sure.
Because even though there were some bad extrajudicial killings, like generally, like, I mean,
No,
community policing, if you piss off a guy and you stole his life savings,
I'm going
he will
to
chase
destroy
you
your
harder.
argument with one word.
Joseph Smith's martyrdom?
Missouri.
Yeah.
yeah, Joe Smith is all anti everything you just said.
Because he was silly enough to give up the guns to the U.S. government.
Well, I mean, he didn't. I mean, he got murdered by a mob.
You're right. I just totally got dumped.
Yeah,
It's okay, Carden.
I just got crapped on by my own logic.
but you know, the point is, look, obviously, I am very. This is a topic I'm very passionate about because I'm easily frustrated with what we've done to the world and our nonchalant, walk away
reason.
of, we're just like, and once you kind of like, once you really accept the fact that our soldiers have indeed been terrorists, like once you accept that reality, you get very uncomfortable with the flag worship and the bootlicking and the you go, okay, this I literally think these are the same.
I would push back on that still, though. I think that you're doing a very good job of being empathetic towards the people who were had the military action taken against them, but you're doing a very bad job of putting yourself in the boots of the people who were sent there. Like we said, it's a presentist argument that you're presenting. You're talking about this from somebody who understands what happened 10 years later, not the guy who showed up there. I don't think that they were showing up with the intent to be terrorists. And in fact, they actually improved some lives while they were there. They helped.
Yeah, and it is kind of also absolving the people that committed heinous acts that brought the U.S. government there in the first place.
Yeah.
Like, you quickly
we're making this very black and white when it is so much more gray. So I want to push back on that particular aspect of what you're saying, because I think that we're doing a disservice to reality to pretend that our terroristic forces showed up and then just everything was bad because our terrorist forces made it that way. Things weren't great there.
And we do have to choose, is the world better off because Osama bin Laden ultimately was taken out? And yes, I get you can only transfer water in a leaky bucket, and we probably committed some human rights violations.
Osama bin Laden, you mean Tim Osman, the same guy that worked for the CIA under George H.W. Bush?
This one gets deep.
Yeah, I was about to say we got
I'm
whole
sorry.
other.
I also you want me just to buy in the pre-narrative as well?
I have a feeling that with the good smelling pizzas that our assistant just brought in, I don't want to postpone
producer.
those. Yeah, producer.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was looking for with those good tasting pizzas that they finally just brought in. I don't want to. You can put them down. You don't have to put them up there.
But yeah,
I'm smelling the pizza, and I don't want to do a 45 deep dive into the.
I just say we need to be careful about how we judge the individuals who went through things. I think you have some very accurate things to say about judging the institution itself, but we need to be careful about how we're judging the individuals who are taking part in things that we didn't experience for ourselves.
And we'll quickly engage in the same unrighteous dominion that we're condemning if we do that.
Yeah,
I think that's
No. I will never go grab a gun and shoot a bunch of Iraqis.
No, that's not what Cardin's saying.
I don't think that's what the generals said either. I think they said we need to go get guys that have done. Oh my gosh, you won't budge.
Let's end part one.
You
Let's
won't
eat,
budge.
and maybe there's a part.
Like there's way too many good things. Oh, you need to understand the good. Trust me, live overseas, dog. We've lived overseas. And
Okay, yeah, but like none of you have been in a war. Like it's not pretend you were in Nam
I've been
fighting Bamboomin. You know what I'm saying?
No, but
Actually,
You're right. My deployments don't count. So-
Richard has.
No, I mean of us, like the hosts.
Okay.
No,
but I'm saying, dog, like when you go watch The Saint with Elizabeth Shue and Val Kilmer before all of his ailments. I'm totally dating myself here, but one of my mom's favorite movies was The Saint, and I think it was because Val Kilmer was hot, in addition to it being a good movie, right? But there is a beautiful scene where Elizabeth Shue has to make it to the embassy before the mafioso grabs her, and she's screaming, "I am an American, I am an American, I am an American." And we can very quickly be engaged in, as Thomas S. Monson said, an ingratitude, okay, a cataclysmic ingratitude, if we don't understand that half of the argument as well. The U.S. does amazing, beautiful things as well overseas that unfortunately are not as vocally spoken about as the things it does bad. And if we start only talking about the things it does bad, how are we any different than the criticisms that we level against the anti-Mormons against us?
Yes.
Right.
We lose the nuance of the conversation and end up making it too black and white. We oversimplify it in a way that is no longer productive.
But I don't think there's any nuance to we can do as many good things as we want, but when there's 1 million dead people, nothing's going to make up for that. Nothing cancels it out. Like, we killed 1 million people.
Now, you're making a good question of how do you measure human life? You can't look at it mathematically as though one's a negative and therefore one's a positive. So we've got a +3.
Dun, dun, dun. How do you measure the love of a man? How about la, 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 da. Remember that? Seasons of Love from Rent?
Yeah.
No, I don't. But that's awesome.
hey,
I
My
never
fellow
did
theater
Rent.
people here understand.
Boy, gotcha.
Okay, cool. So I get, just like, see, I was actually thinking of what the president said in Alcatraz with Sean Connery when he said, how do you measure human life? But, you know, you're thinking of Rent. I'm thinking of a monologue from an action film in the late 90s and early 2000s. Either way, we all understand that it gets dicey when you take a mathematical approach to human life that none of us are
Even capable of
The
understanding.
U.S. military wants peace. There's a piece of you here and a piece of you there.
Yeah,
Okay,
oh,
that's what we
okay.
want.
You win. Let's go eat the pizza before we give somebody an ulcer. Anything you want to say as our libertarian guest before we go, Richard Stafford? Besides vote libertarian, you shameless plugger.
You know, the Libertarian Party, the Libertarian perspective on wars, we are anti-war, but we are pro-troops, right? We understand that people are in those positions. They might be going for the right reasons and not realize what they're participating in. We have soldiers, Marines, sailors,
And I
airmen
agree. I'm not
that are-
angry at them.
that get
yeah.
involved in things. I have family that were assigned to units and they had to do things that they didn't want to do, and they suffer from PTSD to this day because of the things that they did on behalf of their government. So it's one
Our
of the
soldiers
things that,
suffer as well.
right? And
yes.
one of the libertarian efforts is to eliminate, you know, the 22 veteran suicides a day by stopping how much PTSD comes back from needless war, right? There's a proper role for defensive measures and whatnot.
Yeah.
And a lot of those that you're referencing aren't that.
Rock on. Okay, cool. Let us know what you guys think, where we go wrong. Please get some advice to our buddy here about how they can win a couple more elections. We'd like to see some more libertarians around. So if you got any pointers for our libertarian friends, then let us know and we'll send them along. This is Midnight Strike Through Mormons. See you guys in the next program. Hey guys, Cardinellis here. Thanks for watching the video. Now, before we go on to the next video, we gotta talk. We've got a ton of subscribers for which we are very grateful, but unfortunately, I'm going over the analytics and less than 15% of you guys have clicked on the bell icon next to the subscribe button. Now, besides being subscribed to this channel, you need to click that bell icon so you get alerted to every video we drop. We're making about 3 videos a week, dropping them once every other day, and you're not gonna see all of them unless you've clicked on that bell icon. So please make sure you like and you share and you subscribe and you also click on the bell icon. See you guys in the next program.